know this is like totally unrelated, but can we talk about the tech people? Apparently, it's not all tits and champagne within the tech industry. Oh, they'll be fine, you say. They have those fat paychecks, don't they? Well, not everyone is a self-made by mommy CEO, however, to quote one of our guests for this episode, and the tech lifestyle can throw quite a few curves at you. This episode we follow Bogdan along his journey, hopping from one tech job to another, across the country and eventually the continent. We talk outsourcing, unpaid overtime, and deadlines that defy the space-time continuum. Let's go! How's it going, Bogdan?
Hi Diana, hi everyone, glad to be back. Well, it's been an interesting summer, to put it mildly. I'm sure none of us is going to ever forget it. I think I can summarize it by just saying that I'm happy to be alive and to be here to do this podcast, because it means that...
You're alive.
Exactly. And that's probably the most we can ever hope for these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's the millennial lifestyle, isn't it?
Exactly, it's this, I'm a minimalist fundamental.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so way back in the day, when you first joined me to talk about some dreadful, horrible 19th century politician, and I asked you to introduce yourself, you mentioned you are part of the IT crowd. And this episode, I wanted to have an interview / gossip fest / general moaning and venting session about what it means to be a tech worker. And since my knowledge is fairly limited in this area, I can only provide the Philistine take on pretty much everything that has to do with the topic. While you have the insiders and, unfortunately, occasionally victims' perspective. So I wanted to have this chat with you about those working in this tech industry, because in most countries, at least, they are a segment of the population that is substantially better paid than those in other occupations. And it's sort of unlikely that when you discuss the working man or woman's plight, you'd think of a tech worker, right? Despite the fact that the industry itself encompasses a wide enough range of jobs for you to have large discrepancies between the wages, I assume. And in Romania, especially in large cities or in growing ones, IT workers are generally blamed for rent and cost of living increases. So it's hard for someone earning a lot less to feel solidarity or empathy towards them, is sort of what I'm trying to say. But there is certainly a lot to talk about in terms of workers' rights, abuse in the workplace, mental, sexual, and probably at times even physical. So that's why I grabbed you, our closest tech pal for the job. So to kick things off, how long have you been working in the IT industry?
Well, roughly speaking, I started my career in 2014 with my placement here, so smack in the middle of university life. It wasn't really a placement. That was more like the excuse I had after the fact, because I got a full employment contract in Cluj. I didn't want to lose it, so like I said, I informed uni that I'll be taking it to take advantage of it. Normally, you request a placement here, then do your utmost to actually find a job. I couldn't even get hired in Little for during 3 years of studying, so the way they wanted it to be done was basically almost impossible. So you can imagine my shock when I ended up, a guy that did 3D modeling the first year, and then pivoted towards design with programming, and then I ended up being asked if I didn't want to relocate the opposite end of the country for a full-time position as a C++ developer. Small note here. C++ is one of the programming languages, the things you write your code in. That's probably viewed as one of the most toughest ones among the popular ones employed in the industry, because it's the one that's underpinning stuff like operating systems like Windows, coffee machines, and carp dashboards, etc. So the discrepancy was huge.
You arrived in Cluj, and this is how we met during your brief stint in Cluj. Mm-hmm. But then you moved around a few times. How did you end up in Malta, right, where you are located right now?
Oh, well, that's it's a long story, and this entire odyssey, if you can call it this way, was basically motivated by my need to liquidate my student loan.
The infamous student loan. It sets people in motion. You are like the Ulysses of.
And to be honest, I think I had it a lot easier than most people. I mean, even in Europe. I mean, even in pre-Brexit was better than post-Brexit because they doubled tuition fees from what I've.
They had doubled tuition fees just as I finished my degree, and then they doubled them again. So it's getting a bit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, to segue a bit into the main topic of our discussion. Some people keep thinking of Moore's law, where progress is exponential. Okay, that maybe was valid for how much juice you can get out of the same piece of silicon, but really you can't apply the same thing to humans. You can't just extort them exponentially year on year. But apparently some aren't getting the memo yet.
No, they're not.
So I returned. I returned to Romania. Got back in contact with my first employer from Cluj because it was the only thing I had, and a freshly minted debt as well. And they opened an office in Iași, so I figured, okay, that's nice. I can sit in my hometown. I don't have to pay rent anymore. I can work for the same employer, which I figured.
The devil,
Exactly, but that's the bad thing about it. I didn't really see my employer back then as the devil I knew. That offer, and like I said, was quite a shock to be receiving such an offer. One of the other reasons I didn't mention for moving to Cluj and all of that was I was in a bit of a rough spot back then. Coping with depression and all that stuff, almost nearly fell in the alt-right pipeline. Managed to pull myself out, although I was still trapped with some unsavory characters. And this employer, was. I made a conscious decision to get hired and all of that because I figured, okay, if I keep my mind occupied, it's going to help me through. And the first impression was really good. The team was good. Everything was okay. Of course, the salary was dog shit compared to the average in the industry. Yeah. But I didn't really care that much. I was just happy I had a purpose. I had the team, and I worked on a cool project. And that during that emotionally vulnerable phase of mine, I suppose, left me with probably an unhealthy amount of appreciation towards my employer, which all came crashing down against me when everything in Iași turned out to be the polar opposite of what I experienced in Cluj. The project I ended up with was working on was a clusterfuck. So our direct customer was a German startup, which turned out to be your classical milk the VCs of their money with fake fake promises and then bail out when you get caught. And we were trying to work with them on an almost impossible project for an American company, and it was our company's reputation at stake, while we also had to somehow deliver on something that our direct customer was supposed to be working on. Was a triangle of death. If you end up with stuff like this, management's priority will always be their bottom line and, of course, the company. They could care less about you.
Their only responsibilities towards the shareholders.
Which
and themselves.
The warnings were there
from way long ago. But you know how it is with management. You try to warn them about situations arising from within the projects, within the situation. They're like, yeah, okay, technical details, I don't care. You know, do what you want to do. And when those things spiral out of, okay, I don't give a shit what you guys say or do, fix it immediately.
And if you go, I told you so, then they retaliate.
Yeah, or they pretend they didn't hear that.
Yeah.
The team lead at that time, I mean, we didn't really get along at all, and I didn't get along with my other colleagues either, so I kind of felt trapped. I had no one to talk to about it, and HR felt like a whole bunch of bullshit. Talked to my former colleagues from Cluj, from the same company, and told them about my woes. You know, talked to my former team lead as well. Well, obviously, he was more than happy to have me back on his team, but unfortunately, well, there were no open positions for me, so couldn't justify a transfer. So, you know, that was kind of like my awakening moment when I realized that the company I formed a very strong emotional attachment to was, well, it wasn't really the company actually, it was actually the people from Cluj, the collective from Cluj, which made me feel like a valuable colleague.
So basically the lesson for you was that people will love you, but work won't.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I think I've heard these discussions oftentimes. People kept saying, you know, about politicians or managers. Oh, but they're so nice, such nice guys. You know, they talk about their hobbies and they have like these little cute pets that they care about and blah blah blah, and they donate to funds and charities. Well, yeah, okay. Nobody says, you know, people aren't people at the end of the day, but when it comes down to these relationships within corporations, within businesses, these financial relationships, you know, the human element just goes out the window. So
it feels a bit like most of the modern workplaces. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, obviously, because there are so many occupations out there, but in many instances where people do actually form strong friendships or they have good relationships, oftentimes it feels like it is despite the way things are organized in the workplace generally, because as you said, first and foremost, management is cut off from the people doing the actual work most of the time, and when communication happens, is very one-sided and miscommunication is rampant. And also, oftentimes, although there is a lot of talk about cooperation, but there are these incentives to pit people against one another because, I don't know, to encourage competitiveness or something.
It sort of ties in, you know, this discrepancy between these hard-coded metrics that we were talking about and how they don't mesh with reality. I actually took those metrics to heart because, well, you know, coming from technical background and just, okay, these are the numbers. I'm represented by them. I have to stick to them. So, yeah.
The numbers don't lie.
So, you know, when I started noticing that I was actually slipping down the deep end, I was like, yeah, okay, maybe there's something to work on. So, you know, I joined these bullshit soft skills and anger management courses, which, you know, basically were, I don't know, maybe there are courses out there there's things out there that actually do work, but the stuff that's being generally sold to corporations is usually, they're basically just others trying to, you know, leech off of money. And these things didn't change a thing for me because obviously it's an interrelational thing. It's not an internal thing. Exactly.
Individual.
You know, the optics is that you're the individual. You have to improve yourself. So, you know, I basically gaslit myself there thinking that the company is great and my toxic colleagues, since they seem to get along themselves and are technically competent, you know, again, the numbers, which don't lie, then I'm probably broken somehow.
Yeah, this is really bad, the whole making people feel like they're the problem. I mean, obviously, judging from on a case-by-case scenario, there might be obviously individuals within a company that they're not pulling their weight, they're having trouble adapting, so on and so forth. We're not saying that it's never an individual problem or it's never someone needing to make adjustments, obviously, but clearly you cannot just go, yes, it's always an individual problem.
All this talk about the HR departments brings to mind some of mine and Diana's former conversations about the fact that most of the times the HR departments are not even equipped to deal with some of the problems, and I mean they don't have the knowledge and resources. I'm not sure exactly what resources those would be to investigate the issue. I mean, one colleague comes up and says, like, I don't know, the boss does whatever, or my colleagues did whatever. And generally the person in HR is not really like in the middle of the things. He's not part of the team.
Yeah.
He or her or whatever, they're not part of the projects. They don't have the same actual training as all the other people that are actually working in the company. So they're basically this outside person that most of the time doesn't understand what the fuck is going on, you know?
Yeah, and who probably most of the time will just judge things based on, I guess some guidelines if they do have such a thing. Mm-hmm. But I think it weighs very heavily into what the person who is the victim or the person who is accused of something, how important they are within the company. Like, that's probably going to influence how they look at it.
Sometimes, but other times, honestly, at least what I noticed with the HR in Romania, their most played hand, let's say, is go to the person that it's actually reasonable and be like, couldn't you be even more reasonable?
Yeah.
You know, we know that other person is shitty, so but you cannot have a discussion with them because they're shitty. They don't respond well to whatever we say. So how about you make even more compromises? Because that person, we already know it's shitty. So this is what happens most of the times in my experience, let's say. I'm not trying to generalize.
They have an aversion towards doing their job.
Yes, because they don't know how to do it, you know, because they tried talking to the person who just told them to fuck off, and they don't. I'm not exactly sure what exactly they do in whatever school they do go to.
The school of HR. the school of life.
Yeah, I mean, mostly they should be psychologists.
I think that's very rarely the case.
Yeah, but I mean, in my mind, that's what they should be, to have some sort of resources to handle this sort of situations, because otherwise, how do you know how to do anything? I don't know. They generally they don't know how to handle the conversation. If the person they go to talk to just goes like fuck off, and if they don't have the the green light, let's say from higher ups, to just fire the person, they've got nothing actually.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their occupations in the title human resources. Like with any resource, they care only about the acquisition and the
buying
sale
potatoes,
of the resource.
selling potatoes.
Oi. Yeah, it's literally that. I mean, we're basically just resources in the supply chain of recruitment agencies harvesting us like vegetables and selling us off for consumption. Actually, one of the former jobs I worked for, they didn't even have their own HR department. Everything was externalized. So, yeah, but Irina, what we're saying about, having these guys actually close to the teams, these guys weren't even close to the company. They're literally outside.
Yeah.
Like, in a parallel universe. So, plus it's easier to basically just sell things by bribing, negotiating your early leave when you're no longer fit for consumption, when you're being too much of a pain in their ass. Plus, I mean, on the other hand, it's kind of hard to fire your boss and all the company you work for. Yeah, pretty much. Don't even get me started on all the cover-ups of sexual harassment quietly smothered by HR because the abusers were considered valuable professionals. Looking at all the scandals and and I hope Stephanie Sterling won't sue me for this. AAA companies, liberal use of the trademark there. Sorry about that. It's Ubisoft, EA, all of these. Massive scandals of Blizzard, Activision Blizzard, massive scandals of HR. Basically, the only thing they were used for was to basically just receive complaints from people and put them in the shredder.
We ended up eventually, because so many things that were supposed to be delivered by our direct customer weren't being delivered. We ended up with a meeting, an emergency meeting between our CEO and owner and the representative from the American company, which theoretically we didn't have direct links with. And at the end of the day, we basically short-circuited out of the equation the German startup. So probably, I think the Americans figured out what was going on, and they realized that they should probably better strike a deal with us directly if they want to salvage anything out of this. That's my guess. But I didn't stay long to figure out how they sorted out this mess. So eventually I ended up bailing out of there for suffering a breakdown, and I was happy then that a former high school friend was working as a web developer in a different company, and he managed to get me into that work environment, because he told me it's a peaceful work environment and things are okay. I mean, it was a bit of a shift for me, because, like I said, C++ was mostly used for stuff like e-bikes, industrial things, automotive, smart gadgets, and whatever. While web development is a bit of a different beast, because it focuses more on managing data and sending it across the the intertubes. So I joined these guys, and well, it was a nice experience, getting to see, getting to work on. That's how I started on my path towards becoming a jack of all trades, sort of. It was an interesting experience. It was also an outsourcing company. It was a bit better. There's still one bit of an asshole of a guy in the team, but it's you can never hope for a perfect mix. So they had this thing called sitting on the bench. It was basically they were kind of like hiring, they were recruiting people without actually having a need for developers for particular projects, which was nice, I suppose, because projects come and go. I mean, it's kind of like the gig economy, but between businesses, sort of. So if you end up being recruited during a recruitment drive for a particular project, and that project usually needs a recruitment drive because it's, I don't know, some rich guy's head's on fire and he needs it extinguished yesterday. HR will do whatever they can, all razzle-dazzle in the world to get you hired, and then when the project dies out, okay, we don't need you guys anymore because the emergency is over, so layoffs.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is really interesting because it reminds me at one point when I was in the UK, and I remember talking with some of my British colleagues, and they were telling me about these recruitment companies that function very much in the way you described. So, okay, we need you for this very particular task. You're not really hired. We just pay you. It's almost like they pay you daily or hourly, right? And it's so interesting to see that you don't only have this system for very low-paying jobs, because these were obviously things like, I don't know, I want you to walk my dog, and I don't know, but to also say it for, because oftentimes they say, well, it's low-skilled jobs. Really, if you would like to have more stability and be paid more, then, get an education or, learn to code, bro. So there you go. Even if you learn to code, bro, this sort of way of, earning a living or not is still something that can be part of your life.
So a call came in eventually from the office and head office in Bucharest that they had the guys from ING, the bank, which was one of the customers, they had an urgent need for DevOps engineer. Okay. DevOps engineer. Let me try to explain what this is, because to be honest, even for people in the IT industry, it's still kind of
It's a mystery for you.
Like,
For me, it's just like it could be another language.
An enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a
Yeah.
conundrum.
Totally, but give it a try. Come on. Give it your best shot. What is this?
Well, okay, so linguistically speaking, because that's the easiest explanation one can come up with, DevOps comes from developer operations. It's you're kind of like a jack of all trades, well, of two trades really, stuck between developers, the guys that actually write the software, the code for the applications, and operations, aka IT, as in infrastructure and support networks and the stuff that applications run on. This DevOps engineer is the guy that basically tries to works alongside the developers to ensure that the infrastructure supporting the applications they're testing and building and debugging and whatever gives them exists. If the developers are, say, the truckers, then DevOps would be a kind of a jack of all trades that builds the road, ensures the trucks work.
You are the government.
Yeah, sort of, but it's not top down. You're kind of actually things just crash in your head whenever.
You're a libertarian government. A minimal state.
Pretty much. Exactly. You take all the blame and none of the credits, really. Of course, it depends on how much of the work you're doing is actual IT infrastructure stuff and how much of the work you're doing is actually more developer oriented. But this is, every company has their own way of dealing with this. Mostly because every company, like every human, actually understands the concept of DevOps completely differently. But anyway, for me, like you said, it was an enigma wrapped in a mystery. And I figured, okay, you know what? I switched from doing coding stuff for e-bikes to coding web pages. Like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Sure, let's try this as well. And before I had the interview with the guys from ING, I legit actually Googled the Wikipedia article for DevOps to actually understand what the hell
I just love this sort of confidence coming from guys. They're like, yeah, I got a job interview. I would just Google what the hell am I supposed to do, show up.
I have to say that it's pretty much how I went to my last job interview, where my current boss asked me, so what do you actually know about oncology nutrition? And my answer was, nothing.
Yes, Irina, but you are an honorary white male. We all know that.
So yeah, and I followed the nothing pretty quickly. But I will guarantee you that nobody else will actually know anything, and I am upfront about it and capable of learning. And my then person who was doing the interview and current bosses, because there were two guys, they look at me and they said, well, fair enough, yeah. So yeah, it's for the three people listening to us, just go to the interview. There is no death penalty for a horrible interview, so just go and do it, whatever it is. Even if you just Google the Wikipedia page, just do it. Okay, so go ahead, Bogdan.
In my defense, they did mention from the get-go that no experience required, willingness to learn is expected. And I've spent an ungodly amount of time during high school just messing around with IT-related stuff and configuring virtual machines and networks and whatever, and
normal nerd stuff instead of normal normie stuff like going outside and playing. So I figured, okay, I mean, the idea was basically, hey, okay, now's the chance to actually turn some more or less useless knowledge into something practical. Same way I did actually with my university degree. Plus, I was paying my student debt at £32,000 and me repaying about 150 to 300 a month. That was barely covering the the interest rate. So the salary they were offering in Bucharest was double that amount. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to be staying in this debt hellhole for the rest of my life. If it means actually having a chance to realistically decrease my debt, then yeah, okay, I'll do it. So off I went to Bucharest. It was interesting working for a bank. The tech department was a bit of a world of its own, really. I mean, banks and the automotive sector are highly conservative environments. This department was a bit interesting because, like I said, it was a bit of a world of its own. ING, at least in Romania, tries to sell itself as a not digital first bank, more like a brick and mortar bank, but at the forefront of technology. Let me tell you that internally, the non-techie part of the bank never really held us in high regard.
I just have to say one thing about ING because I hate them with like every fiber of my being. I only had to interact with ING once. When I had my 10 years anniversary of finishing high school, and the guy who was doing the organizing was collecting the money from us in an ING account because that's where he kept his money. So, like a normal person, I went to a random ING branch. And I said, I have to put this money into this account. And the woman at the desk looked at me and with a serious face told me,
I'm sorry, we do not work with money.
And I was like, potatoes? I'm like, is this not a bank? What do you mean you don't work with money? And then she looked at me like I was like the scum of the earth.
I mean, we don't work with cash.
Oh,
you peasant.
You peasant, exactly. And I'm like, and how the fuck am I supposed to put this money into this guy's account? And she was like, you could open up an account with our bank. And I'm like, fuck you.
Oh, okay, so then you can actually physically take money, but otherwise you can't. Your hands are tied, or they just disappear.
And for everybody who doesn't know me, when I say that I said fuck you, like that's what I said.
With all your body, you did a performative dance
of fuck you. And then she explained to me that I can go to the main branch that was in a completely different part of town, and that is the only place where I could put my money into some sort of machine and somehow direct it towards this guy bank account. And me being me, I just yelled in the middle of the fucking bank that ING can go fuck itself, and whoever thought about making a bank that doesn't actually deal with cash can also go fuck themselves.
And then you were banned, right?
and then I left before the security dude came. And I called my colleague and I told him that he can also shove his organizing up his ass, and unless he gives me a different account that is not ING, I will just not give him the money. And the guy was like, well, okay, like, I trust you. You can give me the money when you come in Constanza.
Oh, God.
So, like, that's my experience with the ING, and they can still go fuck themselves. That being said, do tell me more about their amazing IT department.
Fun fact: I was working at them when they rolled out the. We no longer have physical branches.
Oh, so it was you!
Oh my God! So it was you who should have go fuck himself. Okay. It's good that I didn't know that when we first became friends.
In all fairness, I never consider fucking myself as an insult, more as a pastime, so as a hobby, so so I'm cool with that. I don't mind.
Okay, then let's move on.
So we had a team lead I had back then. He was an okay guy because he pushed a lot. He pushed the envelope a lot in trying to actually modernize the internal technologies we used and developers used in their daily activities. You might be saying, okay, what's the difference in changing, I don't know, one programming language for another, or a version of a tool with something else? You know, it's kind of like, in this case, kind of like switching from, say, I don't know, a miner's pick to a pneumatic drill, in a way. It's apart from productivity increases, it also made the lives of developers a lot easier. The technology we were using internally was obscene, ancient stuff.
You were chipping the code onto a block.
Yeah, on a clay tablet, and then we had to go to the furnace on the 27th floor to actually, write the code in the tablet. Then that tablet had to be sent to the data center with messengers, and yeah, it was really hard, especially when the aux card broke. Yeah, I don't know how the hell this guy actually managed to convince management to do this, because there were a lot of changes done. It wasn't exciting, it was nice. So many things were being changed and pushed until he got promoted out of the way, and from what I've heard from former colleagues, they've been telling me that nothing has changed ever since I left. So something tells me that, okay, he got promoted out of the way, and that was it. That's where the reforms stopped. And people have been trying to move out of the company ever since. When you spend most of your time with dealing with bureaucracy instead of actually doing your work, yeah, I can understand it. Yeah, eventually I had to leave these guys as well, because I was doing my first master's degree back then, remotely. I had to focus solely on my dissertation project, because the deadline was coming close, so I had to take unpaid leave, and, well, if you take unpaid leave, of course you can't pay your rent, because obviously landlords don't give a shit what you're doing or not. So I had to leave back home in Yash, finished my dissertation, okay, everything was nice. After that I was like, well, okay, what am I going to do? Took a temporary stint there for a company that broke off of it was a joint venture between Continental and Osram. Tried to migrate some of their data over to new servers and stuff. The project I worked on was a bit insane. Eventually, I've solved the situation by actually being contacted by an HR recruiter who was recruiting for my first employer in Malta. I crunched the numbers for the budget they were offering me, and I figured, okay, I can actually liquidate my loan in like 2 years instead of 5 to 8, and that was the end of that story. So yeah, off I went to Malta. Now, living in the country wasn't exactly an easy thing, though, and I'm still questioning that decision this day. It's just so much emotional baggage to unwind and reflect upon. Well, that first job was another pain in the ass. Pompous rich kid, self-made by mommy CTO. CTO means Chief Technical Officer. It's kind of like a technical director, I think, in Romania. Zero technical knowledge from him, to be honest. I'm not much of a director either. And really shady subcontractors, which, they were shady. They told me that actually the guy is, shocker I know, from a very rich family who made a solid fortune through the housing market.
You mean a self-made man?
Oh, yeah. Barely out of university and already...
That's only because he started making himself from very early on.
Oh, yes.
Sure. He's been pulling himself by the bootstraps.
Before he even had boots on his little teeny tiny toes.
Yeah, my father always used to tell me when I complained about whatever, wanting something. And my father always told me, it's your own fault because you didn't know whose child you wanted.
Wise words.
So,
that's...
wise words.
Mm-hmm.
So the children of very wealthy parents have definitely did their job since birth. I mean,
They
knew.
knew to be born very close to the nucleus of meritocracy. That's what they did.
Yes. Absolutely.
They've proven themselves to be way smarter than all of us, from very early stages of their life. So
I mean, it wasn't the secret that mentioned the fact that you can also choose your parents. So I'm guessing they just, they were very mindful about the families that they would be born into.
I actually I know that I like all the jokes about The Secret, but like I have no idea actually what it said. I know it's about bullshit, like putting vibes into the universe, and the vibes will...
QED, hence your problems. You don't know about The Secret.
Yes, I realize that's
also your
that's all.
attitude is not conducive towards channeling the secret in your favor.
Yes, I'm sure that like I don't put the right vibes and I don't channel the right vibes back.
Have you tried investing into more mindfulness exercises?
I tried, but when somebody tries to explain mindfulness to me, I try to slap them. So if you ever hear that I've killed somebody, just know that it is highly likely that that person told me that they do not want a democracy, they want a meritocracy, and I just like slashed their throat. just so you know, if you ever hear that I snapped, it is highly likely to be attached to the word meritocracy.
Do you have a Patreon? Can I give you a bucket list, please?
Well, I have a huge bucket list of mine, but if I happen to finish all the people on my list, I will get to your list.
Oh, sounds good. The team leader, actually, from my remote team, he was one of the oldest guy in the company, as in terms of experience, being with the project from the beginning. He kind of ended up taking me as sort of like his organizer, planner guy, sort of scrum master, the trade. And this actually came at a time when after our IT guy got fired because of this stupid shit, and it was very demoralizing for me, and I had several incidents with my CTO also because of stress and his utter incompetence. So being backed by this guy was a lifeline. I mean, he saved me from a lot of bullshit that was being sent my way, and in return, actually, we kind of managed to fight back in a way through the technical field. Our team lead was actually from Bangladesh, so totally different time zones, totally different locations, but he went up and beyond the Call of Duty. Like, he actually broke lockdown during the monsoon season in order to reach the only place with internet access he could find in his area, because lockdown caught him in his native village, which didn't have any kind of internet access. So he ended up breaking lockdown to go in the middle of some field somewhere to actually get mobile coverage so he could stay in touch with us, so he could finish some stupid tasks that the boss baby wanted done fast. He told us in the meeting, in our team meeting, that he actually broke lockdown. I honestly didn't know how to react. I was personally shocked and insanely grateful at the same time, and
Because
also
there's a
worried.
pandemic, yeah.
While this was going on, our CTO was like, well.
So he pulled on
this.
Amazon, like, you shouldn't shit in the bags, but not actually addressing the reason why people shit in the bags.
He didn't even bother stopping enough to actually finish this three-word sentence. It was something like, I don't know, like you heard a fly buzzing around and just instinctively moved your hand or something.
So, did you feel like there was actually, despite all the bullshit, there was this sense of solidarity between you and your coworkers, at least? I mean, this is what I'm getting.
Yeah, definitely. Especially at least in this case, the shared adversity and small acts of kindness from others and the sense of gratitude and I have to give back definitely helped coagulate this kind of solidarity and resistance. For a very short while, there was this younger junior colleague from Ukraine, and I noticed in him the exact patterns of burnout and stress that I noticed in myself as well when I started things, and I realized that actually this guy is competent and actually he knows his shit, even though he's the things he physically delivered were indeed not up to par, but I knew this was because of stress. I realized all this, and my team lead also agreed with me. Obviously, the CTO didn't see this that well, and so what we ended up was actually me and the team lead. We started manipulating the tasks and the planning schedules so as to try to give this guy as much free time as possible, while also trying to sell the things he's working on to make them look more important than they actually were. I mean, truth be told, at this stage in time, nobody actually really gave a shit about the product or anything. It was basically just using the tools that you had to try to oppose the shit that came from up top. Now that's what we did. We overestimated the complexity of tasks. We exaggerated the time we needed to do things. We exaggerated the value of those things, and also something I learned from university. I tried to create new tasks that on paper looked like they'd give a very high bonus and value, but they're just basically time wasters.
Really.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you think that we had this solidarity going on inside, and everything held up until our little team
But
no
you never,
longer.
even for a moment, discussed maybe making this ad hoc solidarity into something more structured, more long-lasting, that would maybe endure even if some people would end up leaving the project. And
The problem here is I was actually the only, and in this department, I was actually the only employee directly hired. All these were contract staff, and welcome to the gig economy. You're your own boss. You can do whatever you want. Blah blah blah. No. The only thing that this thing is useful for is that you're not covered by labor law because you're a business entity. You're not a person. There's this hyper-individualist mentality is actually very strong in the sector. A lot of workers so far in the fields I've been on are very market liberal minded, so to say.
not a lot of communists in IT.
No, actually, no. And it's always when it comes down to collective rights and collective bargaining, the hyper competitiveness edge comes out, and a lot of them go like, well, why should I let someone else bargain for me? Huh? Why? No, I want the best deal for me, and I can, and the only way I can do it is through myself. And I don't need others to tell me what rights I have or not.
Also, like what I noticed from my extremely generalized opinion of IT people, I'm obviously kidding, but I know that I cannot have an opinion based on only the people that I tend to speak with. But my experience with the IT guys I spoke in Romania has been weird. The level at which most of them are not that they're not into politics. I talked to this one guy and we were talking about politics, and I told him something about like us in Romania, we don't have many political parties. Like the political parties that actually end up having enough votes to be in parliament and so are like, I don't know, 4 or 5 parties, and like, well, at least one of those are minorities. So like we only have like 3 major parties right now. And I told the guy that the name of one of these parties, and he was like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, what? Like he didn't know the name, not that he didn't know like what policies or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not interested in the politics in Romania. And I'm like, but what? Where do you work? In Romania. Okay. and that experience actually repeated itself a few times. So maybe other people in other countries that work in IT are sort of the same. Therefore, it's a lot harder to think about unionizing and...
Plus, there's also the work environment. If the stress level and the amount of shit being thrown at you constantly is just so high that you barely have enough time to do much of anything else, you're just trying to survive from one day to another, and that's about it.
It seems to me like last time we talked about maybe one of the few places where you should not just postpone any tasks is like the emergency room. But it feels like maybe the sort of constant panic mode that you've described for these projects is like an artificial ER room that has been created, because at the end of the day, with the exception probably of a few things, you can write the code or whatever, you can get it done tomorrow. I mean, it's not exactly urgent in the sense that most people understand urgent. I mean, of course it is urgent for the people who have, signed some contracts and they need to funnel the money this way or another or whatever they're imagining things. But it's not urgent in the way most people understand urgency. But nevertheless, as you said, it basically sacrifices the mental health of many worker down the line who is constantly pushing and racing against the imaginary deadline that he was set.
But I did this employer during COVID. I was the imbecile one that was back in the office at the first sign of easing, which was right before the second wave hit. I did that job for another one, which ended up being even worse.
The second boss I ended up dealing with after this one was even better. This guy actually was probably from a slightly richer family, because mommy and daddy somehow managed to make him a CEO of a multinational company. Because they had offices in Canada, the US, Estonia, and...
So they have been bootstrapping for several generations, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely, won't be too much of a surprise, because my current team lead actually told me that previously he worked for, what's the name? There's this German toy maker that's kind of like a rip-off of Lego.
Playmobil? Oh, yeah.
Yes. Guess what? The pater familias, the head honcho of the family of this empire, decided to give his son something to do, because he kept messing with the company's mainframe computer and ruining with bugs the production line. Yeah, he used it as his own computer, because why not? Some other people would say, okay, I'll just buy him a computer. No, he decided to literally build him a company in Malta. And he was the owner of this company, and my current team lead used to work there for this guy. Long story short, the kid ended up deciding to sell off the company completely, because he got bored of it one day, even though it was actually surprisingly turning a profit. Of course, nobody was consulted in this decision. Everybody was just instantly laid off.
It's not a democracy, it's a republic.
All the people that contributed to the profits of this company, they weren't just good enough to make a decision on their own jobs. But anyway, my former boss, so this guy, wanted a financial system, a thing that basically just handled transactions immediately, and he wanted it done in like 2 months. And it was an actual ordeal that basically culminated in me having a mental breakdown, ending up with health issues, and the entire development team basically leaving immediately after the project was done. During this period, medical bills basically just doubled my living expenses. It was also, all of this happened during the pandemic as well, and it took me about, I think, 6 months to actually somewhat get slightly better in terms of health out of this. And it was just insane. Like you said, this literally didn't have to be delivered in 2 months. This wasn't physically possible to be delivered in 2 months, because we delivered a shit, actually, an utter flaming pile of shit. And at what cost? He ended up losing the entire development team.
So anyway, 2 mental breakdowns later, I ended up at my current job, which is, well, at least it's harkening back to the initial jobs I had, more of a traditional style corporation when I'm working on a 15-year-old project, stable project for the automotive industry, where that's been mostly peace and quiet since I joined in March.
Okay, so would you say that there are any features that, for instance, distinguish the IT or the tech industry in Romania as opposed to any other place you've worked in?
I mean, let me preface this by saying, obviously this is my own personal subjective experience. Others might see it differently. Probably the first thing you'll notice, going way back to what I said about getting a job, the UK market seems to be oversaturated, while the Romanian one just doesn't seem to be able to hire enough people. Well, okay, Brexit has changed things a bit, because from oversaturated, probably they're starting to get a bit more desperate now, hiring people. But pre-Brexit, it was definitely oversaturated.
And why do you think that is? Is it because of the sheer volume of outsourced work, or because there aren't enough people interested in STEM in Romania? The difference that you were talking about between the two markets.
To be honest, I think there's multiple factors at work here. And in the case of Romania, there is interest. Well, probably not in a wider field of STEM, because there's always the issue, when you can't really do a technical education because we no longer have proper technical high schools anymore, so that thing goes out. But in the case of universities, usually you have parents going to tell you, why would you want to do that? Do you want to die? Do you want to die of hunger? Get a real job.
That's an Eastern European parent slogan. Yes, we all recognize.
Yeah.
So at least in the fields of STEM, the only area that's really interesting for people seems to be indeed IT, mostly because of the media created image. I mean, it is a high paying field on average, but there's also an issue. They tend to overinflate things. They sell this glamorous picture, usually inspired by success stories from Silicon Valley tech bros and stuff like that, which, as I've already mentioned, usually it's basically mommy and daddy finance their way to success, and that's not how the field works in general. Plus, you also have this, at least in Romania, I keep seeing this in news reports. Oh, the average pay in the IT field is this amount of lei. Well, yeah, that's the average. That's the statistical average. But in reality, actually, you have insanely high earners and top management, and you have then everybody else, which indeed are paid more than the average in Romania. But the average within the sector is, it's like in this gap between these two social categories, which nobody actually earns. So this attracts a lot of people who are saying, okay, you know what, this is not my passion, I'm going to try to learn, go into programming and see, I want to earn more money so I can live a better life. The problem is the system. Back home, which are issues I've noticed among my friends as well. Many are put off from finishing university because of how dull and backwards everything is. Taught materials out of touch with reality, out of date, too much stuff lumped together which you could split into different specialties. Bureaucracy makes you want to kill yourself or kill the others. The university's main and only concern in Romania mostly is student retention, because if you don't have enough students attending courses, they're forced to close. Unfortunately, the methods they try to employ are, well, paradoxically they're part of the bleed out problem, because they try to force student retention by, confiscating your diplomas when applying, so make sure that you don't apply to a second university at the same time. And of course, then there's the politically connected administration, which you end up at the end of the day wondering how on earth did we actually end up ranking among the highest amount of anti-vaxxers in the EU.
Yeah.
And of course, there's, apart from this, so this is education towards entering the IT field. This is the public sector. Then there's the private sector, which has a market, a semi-legal, probably completely unregulated market of private courses, which are mostly rip-offs, because, well, some unscrupulous people working in IT have figured out that, hey, you can actually make more money out of people's desperation to enter this field by pumping up this already ill-conceived, glamorous image of IT work, and, sell them some courses that are completely ill-equipped to help them. Just keep them in the system to pay more and more money on more and more material and until they just give up. Now, on the other side of the coin, the outsourcing market, as you said, when the EU expanded eastwards, it did so during the golden era of the cheap foreign labor mentality. I think this is no longer the case, given how much the EU has dragged its feet trying to integrate countries from the West Balkans, only to be vetoed out randomly by some Western country or another. This probably is because, I think it's a signal that West European policymakers are now more concerned with scoring right-wing brownie points with their local electorates. But yeah, the period from 2007, when Romania and Bulgaria joined, up until 2014, 2015, when the first migrant crisis happened, and there was this rise in alt-right rhetoric. I think it cemented us in Bulgaria as the designated cheap labor pools of Europe, possibly Poland as well, because at least in the, let's call it the Anglosphere, which Malta, Gibraltar, and Britain now. I'm seeing loads of Polish contractors as well. There's also a lot of Serbian and Ukrainian contractors as well, which makes me think that perhaps in this new cheap labor 2.0 electric gigolo economy, if you have enough free trade agreements between the EU and third-party countries, you no longer need to physically expand the union, Mm-hmm. So you can keep the peasants out, but also reap the fruits of their labor, and, keep the nationalist electorate happy, because you're not integrating any more countries into the EU.
The EU has learned the lesson of the Ottoman Empire, that at some point didn't even annex countries. They were like, yeah, just give us money and we'll pretend like we're fine.
Yeah, you pretend you're in the EU, we'll pretend we'll give you benefits. Looking back at things, I'm still surprised how I managed to survive on 450 euros living in a matchbox in Cluj when I started my job.
So can you put that salary into perspective for, whoever at some point from outside Romania might be listening in on this?
Some rough numbers, let me see. About 3 euros is a pack of coffee and 4 to 5 one of cigarettes. Shawarma, which is the mainstay of corporate diet, probably about 2 euros. I used to spend about 120 euros on utilities per month, and my rent in that matchbox of a dwelling was also 150, so that left me with about 180 euros to cover a whole month. Now, as with every, youth living in Romania or in Eastern Europe, the usual packet from family and grandparents was also, helped
Zakuska
me.
to the rescue.
Oh, yes. So, in Romania, they're recruiting left and right, and most of this growth is due to the outsourcing sector. Western companies are desperate to offload their projects in countries like Romania and Bulgaria, because, apart from lower labor costs, they're still in the common market. So, even though, like we already said, they started figuring out ways of not necessarily needing people to be in the common market. It still helps, because you can put a physical office, and manage things better this way, and legally it's still easier. So yeah, the Romanian IT industry is still primarily centered around contractor-based services. Initially, in the 90s and early 2000s, IT in Romania was mostly based around call center support services. Now we're doing outsourcing. Still little to no R&D, actual R&D. Again, because then this would involve higher skilled labor, which obviously would have to be paid higher. And well, I mean, on one side, yeah, the education system isn't really that great, to be honest. But on the other side, that's not our main purpose as a market. We're just a cheap labor pool. Okay, things are, of course, evolving in a way that they are progressing. Salaries have started growing, at least before the pandemic. They even doubled actually since my first job. I mean, even Microsoft opened up a branch in Iași. Well, they planned on developing product called Surface Duo, but Microsoft being Microsoft, they actually don't think they actually managed to go through that project. And to be honest, whoever joined them back in Iași probably got redundant immediately, because I didn't see any other news or activity or anything happening in Iași anymore.
That's probably because of the divorce between Bill and Melinda, so...
Yeah, they were definitely fighting on the Iași.
I mean, come on, of course.
From an employee's perspective, are your everyday experiences all that different now that you work, abroad?
Well, for once, OSHA is almost non-existent. That's Occupational Health and Safety Authority. The guys who technically are supposed to ensure that you live in a healthy and proper work environment, that the employer doesn't basically rip you off like on a slave plantation. Now, minor aside, because this happened recently, there's a massive scandal here in Malta, which involved a refugee working on a construction company here who had a work accident. And these guys from the occupational OHSA didn't do their job, and the employer wasn't really keen on providing any kind of protection or spending useless money. Employee safety. You know what the employer decided to do? He literally took the guy as he was there, wounded with his back broken, took him away several kilometers and dumped him in a ditch.
You're trash, kid.
What?
And also threatened him not to say anything about it, because he'll kick him out of the country.
Okay, well, I mean...
The latest news is that the guy who did this, and obviously there was a massive public uproar against this, guess what happened? He got out on
Justice
bail.
has been served.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we definitely live in a world full of meritocracy and justice, so... I mean, if he would have just learned to code, this would have never happened.
So I've been told.
So, I mean, apart from this, for instance, nobody seems to be tracking working time, at least for the first two companies I worked for. This one actually, apparently the current employer I'm working for, actually does things by the book. But the first two ones, nobody bothered tracking time. They just automatically filled in 8 hours, and that was that. Now, the downside to that was obviously you couldn't fill in any kind of overtime, because there was no system to do that, so yeah.
Okay.
But did they pay you for overtime?
No, of course not.
Did they offer something like time off for overtime you did?
No,
or
everybody worked themselves constantly overtime. So you had this, this unfortunate mentality of, we work is glorious. We have to work till we drop dead. This Stakhanovite mentality.
This for me is just like such a foreign concept. Why the fuck would I work myself to death?
Because of the glory of the code. You don't understand.
No, I genuinely don't. I have some other friends that have this issue,
It is an issue. It's an illness.
Seriously, guys, it is. I mean, I'm just telling you this in the most friendly way, because you should seek treatment. Definitely. I mean, I understand if you go into, I don't know, emergency medicine or something.
Yeah, don't be a slacker
okay,
in the emergency room. Please don't.
Yeah, like there actually are jobs where like you have to work every minute where you're there, but also even in those jobs, when your shift is over, you really should go the fuck home, and if they need more people, they should fucking hire more people. But if you are working in the IT department, so the code, whatever program people run will realize I have no idea what I'm saying here. Whatever the work it is that you people do is not done, so what? It will be done tomorrow. I mean,
But it has to be done yesterday. You don't get it.
No, I really don't.
It's like the trousers of time, but they're all crumpled up and put in the like clothes basket. So thank you, Bogdan, for joining us, and hope to see you soon again.
My pleasure as always.
And I genuinely mean I hope to actually see you soon.
And before we get teary-eyed with this goodbye, I think we should just thank any one of the 5 listeners for listening to the podcast. And
probably Toe and the cat, because of how much I talk.
and you know the usual drill: share and follow and subscribe and spread the word about this if you like it. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Yep. Bye.